Welcome to Value Through Vulnerability. This is a podcast dedicated to putting the human back into humanity. And today, I've got some really cool humans with me today. First of all, we have a founder of Humans First, Mike Vacanti, as the podcast since episode 100 is boosted by Humans First. We also have Deborah Abbott, who is a very cool human. I had the pleasure to meet at the Ignite conference last October. She's facilitating change for human-centered cultures. So really looking forward to learning more about that. And our good friend, Rhys Thomas, who is founder of True Self Consulting. So welcome to the podcast, both.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Gary. It's always good to share a bit of time, have a chinwag with you and Mike, and met Debs recently as well. So looking forward to this.
Fantastic. Well, it's nice to get you on the other side of the mic as well, Rhys. So
Yeah.
as we get going, Deborah, would you mind just sharing just a 2-minute intro? So, what's taking you towards this passion for facilitating change for human-centered cultures?
Yeah, okay, so here we go. Well, I've always been, brought towards serving others. I'm always bringing the people that I'm with in front of me first, and to see, okay, how can I best? And that probably comes from my childhood, because we went from living in England, we moved to Switzerland for a year, different language, different school. And then we moved to Germany for 3 years, again, new language, new school, new friends, new everything. And then we moved to France, new language, new school, new everything. And all this before the age of 18. So obviously one of the things that I took away was obviously adapting, and how can I best adapt? And so this brings out my number one key Gallup strength, which is strategic. So I'm always looking to, I've got all these sort of sensors out there, and I seek to adapt myself to who I'm speaking with. We talk about calibrating with others. And so this has, obviously I went off to the usual business school, la-di-da-di-da, project management career. And then one day, boom, I decided that it's not what I need, and where should I go? So I went on to a huge career coaching journey, if you like, and actually more than just a career coaching journey, a bit more than that. And I went back to university and went for executive coaching, and then I went into coach training for small groups. And then I discovered facilitation. And for me, facilitation is magic, because you're working with the people in the room. You're not telling people, okay, so I'm at the front, so you're going to listen to me, and you're going to do as I say. So actually it's completely like the other flip, it's like totally flipped over, and that's such a beauty. And so always having the human at the center of everything is, for me, the only way to go forward, and to really have and that brings about all my passion to others, and create collective creativity, collective anything is possible when you're together. And so that's, yeah, so from my passion and also my values, you asked me what my values were the other day, Gary, and it's all about growth and connectedness. And so these two values are reflected in what I do every day.
I love that so much. And it really tickled me, actually, because when you sent me back that message, I was like, oh, my two are the same. There we are. How fascinating. So thanks for that introduction. That's wonderful. Rhys, would you mind introducing yourself as well? That'd be awesome.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Deborah. That was great. It's great to see that you guys are connected on so many levels. So for me, my life was carefree, fun. It was all about me until a certain age, when I had a sort of traumatic personal experience, which sort of changed everything. It kind of took me a bit of time to get through that and work past that. It wasn't a burnout, but it was something very, very difficult to get through. But it was only recently that I decided to embark on this sort of personal development journey, probably about 18 months ago, getting into sort of coaching, working with some people, meeting great minds like yourselves, joining groups, going to workshops, experiencing that magic that comes in a facilitation process, not then as a facilitator, but just enjoying the general atmosphere and the possibility that anything is capable. So I was learning about emotional intelligence with another friend of ours, Teresa, who you know, on the podcast with me. We were working towards leadership development. I think it's the thing that drives me. It was a question someone asked me before, where does that come from? I haven't really been a leader of a big team or anything, but what I have had is an experience of bad leaders. And I think that you either come from a position of not knowing or a position of knowing. And I think that sometimes me not coming from a sort of strict guideline with all these ideas of how things should be actually freed me to think about, what things could be. And that is kind of what I brought together in true self coaching, true self consulting, whether it's remote one-to-one by Zoom, or whether it's in person, going in, working with the company, working with the team, trying to find that magic, as Deb said. So that's a little bit about where I'm at. In terms of emotional intelligence, I've actually gone a little bit more than that. Like you, Gary, I've had a bit of a sort of another awakening again in this last 6-8 weeks. And I'm going more into sort of spiritual side of it. I'm looking at spiritual intelligence, so SQ. There's a new, well, it's not necessarily new, but it's something new to me. And I'm exploring that and trying to establish the difference between so ego and the soul. So trying to connect less with the ego and connect more with the soul, and see how that can make a difference. And look about how my coaching can maybe help in a sort of healing and guiding sort of way, rather than a sort of taught, teaching, coaching, directive sort of way. It's more feeling, much as you do with the show, as we do on ours, follow the energy, see what happens, and then follow your intuition.
It's so fascinating for me. Like, thank you both for introducing yourselves. I really hope that people just listen. How unscripted and how organic are both of your worlds now around like that facilitation to create the magic with Debs? You're looking at the spiritual intelligence. It's all about actually connectivity. Like, it's not about, and I've got to bring Mike in for his container busting, because I just think this just speaks brilliantly, Mike, to one of your big passions around like breaking these containers that we've allowed ourselves to be stuck in with for so long.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's expansive exploration, right? It's where do we go from here, because not accepting the limitations that have been forced on us, not accepting the norms that have been put around us. And so I love that. And as they were introducing, it was like, gosh, how would I introduce myself? And I determined that I'm just Gary's bag carrier. And it's actually a really happy place to be too. And especially now in this virtual world, the bags are really, really light, easy to carry. I think of that, and I make the carry the bags joke for the reason that we've been forced to carry burdens with us to capitulate to a system that no longer serves us. And what I love about the expansive the journeys that both of you are on is it's breaking out of those limitations and exploring where you can lead others and empowering others to find their maturity and start to lead themselves. So I commend you both for the diligence it takes to practice those teachings and create that journey for others. So I think this is really fun to be in this conversation.
And Mike, I've just remembered what it is I forgot just earlier, now that I'm listening to you. on the back of what you had said, the first part at the beginning, which is having come out the other end after burnout. And when I wrote my small bio to Gary the other day, I realized that actually, burnout and I would say mental well-being in the workplace is no longer an option. Oh yeah, no, I'll pick that one because I'm fairly like to find out a bit more about it. I'll go on a 2-week course. It's no longer an option. And in fact, it's, and where I see, because I talk a lot about responsibility and leadership, it's a fundamental responsibility to care for the people that you employ. It's no longer an accessory or like, one of the options that you could choose as a leader, or I just don't have the time for it. Excuse me. But it's actually, and for those who continue cultivating these and or just tolerating these toxic environments, is, for me, I can say it's criminal, because what's happening is all these people who are subject to these toxic environments for weeks, for months, for years, they bring it home. and that impacts society. It impacts our children at home. It impacts the people that we're living with, the relationships that we have. It is criminal, and it goes back to what you said right at the beginning. You're talking about the deaths, and the deaths that are linked to people who, or the book that I remembered that book, Dying for a Paycheck. It's exactly that. So burnout is no longer a question as it's like a sideline, like it's like kind of like a luxury to know about it. It's not that anymore. It should be in the center of, and because the human-centric organizations are those who have understood that the livelihood of all and the lifeblood of the organizations are its people and nothing else.
Yeah, and I like that. And to help the reader, to help the listeners come back in. So, all of you, we did have a pre-chat as we were setting up before we hit record here, and we were talking about that burnout, and it was Debs was sharing the story about dropping into that, which I would love to explore more your experience with that. But I had just shared that over the last 18 months through the Humans First conversations and, the live events, and then the many people that I've had a chance to interact with, how many dozens of stories and relationships with people I've developed where I hear the depth of those experiences that have been truly devastating and life-changing for these people. And then we dropped into how common that is, and exploring the work of this that Jeffrey Pfeffer writes in his book Dying for a Paycheck, that comes out of the Stanford research that was done. And that same research has been referred to Heather Hansen Wickman and her Evolved Executive book. She was on the podcast coming up here, it'll be released. And Bob Chapman refers to that research in his work. He exemplifies that caring for people. I think there's leaders out there now that are showing the way. Gary Ridge, Bob Chapman, there's many others that are showing that it is a responsibility beyond what's recognized now. And what was thought of as, mental fitness or fortitude challenges and dismissed by employers for so long, now they're coming to the recognition that in many cases they're the cause of that angst and that trouble and that mental fitness, that those challenges, it wasn't the people that came in and struggled. It was healthy people coming in and then learning to struggle or becoming afflicted really by the environments that they were coming into. So I think you state that really well. It's very important. We look at the deaths. I'm rambling now, but 120,000 unnecessary deaths happen every year in the United States in toxic environments. There's Mayo research that says that your boss has a greater effect on your health than your doctor. We're in the middle of this pandemic and everything's locked down, and we think of, the tragedy that people are dying from this virus, but it's dwarfed by the number of people that die just by getting on the bus and showing up at work in toxic environments, working for bad bosses. And there's been no accountability for that. And I think it's a crisis that it's time to address.
I love what you're going there. And Deborah, I love you using the word criminal. Like, let's really, like, it is a profound responsibility. And I think I'd also like to come to Rhys as well around some of your work, because I totally agree. There absolutely is a leadership, role modeling responsibility. But I'd also invite all of us that are listening, and it's not easy, but there's also an individual accountability to, it's not always easy, but to step into our own power and to realize what matters to us so that we make the decisions that are right for us. And I just wonder how that sort of feeds into some of the work you're doing, Rhys.
Yeah, obviously accountability is a huge thing that those of us that are woken up are fully aware of, but those of us that sort of just dismiss it or not even noticing it, acknowledging it, just take it for granted. I think what Mike was saying made me think about the fact that for so long, leaders or business owners just felt that the staff were expendable. They were, you could easily replace. They were easily replaceable, whether that was through a question of, a scarcity idea that, there's no other options for you, so you just have to put up with whatever I give you, or the fact that there's so many people who are doing such a mundane task as I view it that I can just replace you, at the flick of a switch kind of thing. So there's been a general shift in that idea in the last sort of 20 years, maybe. I'm not sure, maybe those years are wrong, but as there's a sort of rise in the transparency about what and how people are being treated or how people are being led. I think it's interesting in this current situation where we talked about it on our show, that leaders can no longer sort of carry on how they did it in their secluded office or on their top floor. They're now, everything is much more open. There's nowhere to hide. You're on a big Zoom call. In the past, you could have got away with having a one-to-one with someone and reacted in a totally unprofessional or unacceptable manner, and that no one would have seen it. So it was only a case of hearsay or don't be a case of rumors. Whereas now in this sort of thing, people have had to totally either change their realization, which is good, out of necessity. Change out of necessity is good. Change out of responsibility and accountability is better. But I think that's one of the good things that I've seen, that this crisis has caused. I think there's a multitude of positive things that we've come here. I know that I'm straying off your topic here, Gary. I'm sorry about that. But, maybe you need to rein me in. What was
meander away? Again? Meander away.
Okay, cool.
All good.
That's it. Yeah.
Rhys, I love that, because I what I heard from that, and I think it's such a great truth, is that, in this virtual world, managers have become irrelevant. Leadership is needed, but there is no micromanaging. It's not possible. and so managers have become irrelevant in this new world, and that self-leadership and true leadership, I think, is more pertinent, more necessary than ever. And I think you made that case very well.
I'd love to come to Debs on this actually as well, because one of the things that comes up for me, and I think some people may think they're listening to a semantic conversation, like leadership, management is all the same thing. And I think it'd be really good to get your view on that difference, maybe through your experience, Deborah, between like management and leadership. Do you see a difference yourself in your experience?
Well, I'm trying not to smile because, management is such an 80s word, isn't it? It was 70s. It's totally like passé, right? When I hear the word management, it's like, wow, where's the trust? Where's the trust in the people that you have? How come, why you got to think for them, and we're still doing task lists and all that? Leadership is so empowering for everybody. I think, and in fact, as a team builder, this is one of the best, my favorite workshops, which I do, it's a series of workshops for a given client, a given team, where, the team are, and I go back to Rhys, what you were saying about accountability. We are individually accountable, yes, but not only, we are collectively accountable. And one doesn't exist without the other. And so when we talk about leadership, everyone ought to be encouraged and feel, and ought to be empowered to be able to lead themselves to start off with, and then work, creatively and collectively, and find their own systems within a given team, because a team that stands still and stands, I should say, on its own and leverages it from itself and is high performing, is where each one of them are leaders in their own rights. And so, anyway, sorry, I could really go off on one. So,
yeah, no, it's
please do.
very good. You know, and it's interesting because the language of leadership and management, I think that still, through the last 100 years, the bureaucratic system that's still in place, right? Primarily, it's how everything is organized, and we still refer to that top authority as the leader, where generally that top authority is a manager, they're a commander, right? So while we think it might be a passé word, it's still the operative behavior, is the leading through authority, or that command manager, right? And we still have the Peter Drucker Institute. People are still being trained in, and we take that going back to the 1950s. Druckerism has turned leadership into a synonym of management. It's become the lesser thing. So there's, we have a long way to go. I think that those areas are breaking down. I certainly believe that's the opportunity for the future, is that self-organizing, and we're hearing that from inside Harvard and inside MIT, and I think that recognition is starting to come even from those big branded testing facilities, right? Also known as universities. That some of the testing facilities now are starting to educate people in what can be and a better way, rather than just assimilating to the best practice of the what I now think of as the ancient world, that of the industrial era.
I'd love to I just want to share one quote from the podcast. I think it's super relevant. Okay, so Doug Kirkpatrick, who's basically one of the modern day fathers of self-management. So back in 1990, so like 30 years ago, Morningstar. This is the observation he shared with me this week on 109, episode 109. One of the observations we made is that people drive into the parking lot, park their car, and come into work. We realize that every one of these individuals is a manager already in his or her personal life. So every one of those individuals is making gigantic life-altering decisions on their own without a boss. They're deciding who to date, who to marry, what to do for a living, whether to take out a mortgage, whether to have kids. Then they come into the organization and then they die. That's my bit on the end. Like, it's just fascinating. I just want people to hear that statement. That was 30 years ago, that someone was enlightened enough to go, actually, they're making, like, human beings are making life-altering decisions every second of the day. They come in for their salary and then just completely just dissolve into something. Like, and I just think it speaks brilliantly to what you're talking about. Is that, why would you not want to unleash the gifts of your people when there's so much evidence of the value of the business when you do? Like, so I think that's a really interesting juxtaposition we're in. Like, the evidence is strong. I've done it in my own work organization. You've got it all over the world, that we make more money by leading with a human-centered organization. Yet people they're still not common. I wonder why you think, Debs, that might be the case. Why are we still not moving this forward as quickly as we all know we should be?
Yeah, and Debs, I mean, does that lack of that, does that lead to the environment that creates burnout?
Well, I like to think about, the importance of engagement. So so Gallup did this huge poll, a massive one, over more than 100 countries. So this is what, in 2011, 2012. And they interviewed millions of workers, okay, across all sectors and industries, and all the way up the ladder, all the way down the ladder. And they came to, I mean, I'm trying to remember the specific numbers, but it was like, so after this 2 year, or however long it took Gallup to complete this poll, they came up to these like quite scary numbers, which were, okay, so hang on a minute. So we've got, I think it's 13%, okay, of the workforce are engaged. I think I've got it somewhere here. So I was looking at it the other day, actually. Yeah, that's it. So 13% engaged, 63% of workers, okay, these are between millions and right across the world, 63% are not engaged. And then you've got 24% that are actively disengaged.
trying to sink the boat.
Sorry?
Yeah, 24% are actively trying to sink the boat.
Exactly. and I can say, like, from my experiences, you don't stay stuck as a not engaged person. You're eventually gonna, you know, either you get out or something. There's a change is going to happen. They don't just sit there for ages, you know, just being not engaged. Yeah, they either become actively disengaged, and in any case, and not engaged. All these people that are sleepwalking, it's like, okay, so what's the price that the organization is paying? You know, given that they haven't harnessed what, you know, what it means to engage their employees, and that's a huge amount. How much time and energy and all other resources are being wasted? I need to read the book. I haven't read it yet.
Well, I can actually give you the financial number, and it's a significant amount. When we look at the lost productivity, and we look at the additional health costs alone to those to the disengagement or the toxic environments, is an additional $600 billion. And then when you look at you know, absenteeism and everything else, it climbs over $1 trillion. So the effect of loss for business worldwide is over $1 trillion.
Yeah.
And also a huge cause of lack of change adoption and everything else is not including the humans. And so when we look at, you know, another $1.2 trillion has been spent and lost on failed digital transformation projects just in the recent years. The 1.8 trillion that's been spent, 1.2 trillion failed. There's a $2 trillion bogey on the table if we can turn course and correct this. There's found money worth $2 trillion, which would ease a lot of the financial pain that we're going through in this economic shutdown right now, wouldn't it?
And is that's a business driver? Yes, which, of course, because we're in business. What's the definition of an organization? Obviously, not a non-profit organization. It's profit, and as we know, we have the B Corp companies that are coming in more and more, and balancing purpose with profit, people with profit. So that's the business drive. But fundamentally, if we go, okay, well, hang on a minute. So change has got to be originates from, you can have all the data on the table and nothing happens.
Right.
So what are we asking ourselves the right questions? And you know, and I in a way, I'd like to sort of challenge, or at least question, like, oh, really, is it really going to take so long, you know, for things to really change? What about if you just get, you know, the right people in the room and start from the beginning? So, you know, Gary talks about vision. So what do you want to be? You know, what do you want to stand for? Who do you want to be remembered, known as? What's the legacy that you want to leave behind? Oh, okay. So you want to care for your employees, as an employer. You want to be a caring employer. Wow. Because if that desire is there, the rest is, it's going to happen. Yeah, it's going to flow, because then if it's fundamentally, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm just putting it out there, because we can have all the business cases on the planet showing, you know, you've got this $2 trillion bogey that's sitting there looking you in the face, and you're still going to do nothing about it. And you're still going to see that same bogey guy a year later, and you're going to still be having the same conversations the next year with the same people, probably a few new people, and nothing's going to change. So it goes back to fundamentals. So it's like, you know, when you talk about organizational culture, you know, and if I go and work, I was speaking with a UN client yesterday, and they want to do, because I've set up a virtual team building journey for all these remote teams that all of a sudden overnight with this pandemic, they found themselves at home 24/7, having to work remotely. Gosh, I mean, you know, and totally imposed on them. And I said, well, wait a minute, you know, the thing is it goes back to, you know, I say desire is another word for commitment. if only you guys are committed, but your hierarchy, they're not really quite sure what you're doing, or you prefer not to tell them because you first want to see if it works with you guys, and then, then speak to them. I said the problem is that, and I've done that because I also worked inside big corporations, and I did these workshops, great workshops on team building. But then what happens is then the team, then they go off and they're educated into what they need to do, what they need to put in place to become high performing, and then we get to see each other every 2 weeks and so on. But the thing is at the end of it, you've got a team that are becoming high performing, purposeful team, but they are still in their silo and they're in their bubble, and that bubble will eventually burst because the surrounding system is not supporting it. So we've got to start from the top. If we don't start from the top, all those beautiful, magnificent efforts and those changes and those, kind of like, oh yeah, hug, I love you really, I know we've been like, whatever between teams. And at the end of the day, if the upper management, if the leadership are not on board, it's a lost cause. And I go back to the question, it's like, okay, so what do you want to be? Oh, you just want to make tons of profit. Okay, well, you know what, good luck to you. I'm not interested, because you haven't figured out yet that all that profit comes from the amazingness, the awesomeness of your people.
I love that. I love you laying down the gauntlet for us all today. I think it's important. No, but I do. And I think why I think it's important is because it's the same with inclusion. We've got the stats. We've had the stats for a decade as to that more diverse boards drive better outcomes, more diverse companies drive better outcomes. But again, it's not changing very quickly. So and I think it comes back to this point about, so I have a bit of a challenge around evidence-based. So people give us the evidence, then we'll make a decision. Instead of going, actually, let's run the experiment. Let's actually trust that actually we've got 30 years of data that says this is going to work better than what we're doing. And then still go, no, don't want to do that. So I want to bring Rhys in now at that point, because what is it, Rhys, in your opinion, that stops these leaders that have got a load of evidence as to what better looks like, but they're not changing? Or they're, for those particular people, what do you think is going on for them around the sort of EQ, IQ, ego point of view? What's the sort of story there for you?
Well, first of all, so many great points. You guys are all having such good conversation. I keep coming to ask a question and then it goes somewhere else and I'm having to try to remember everything. But I'll focus on what you said there. So I think it comes down to necessity. I think that unless you're being really forced to make that change, even if you've got the evidence, like we've seen, I wrote something to you the other week about it, saying how people, hopefully during this experience, will have those people who do need to see things and do need to experience them before they believe it. They've had that now. They had that previous conception that, oh, I can't trust these people. I can't let them do what they're own. I can't let them make their own decisions. They do need management. They do need commanding. I love that you bring that word in, because it's totally, that is the right word. You're not managing people. You're not leading people. You're just giving them orders, aren't you? And that's a really, really old fashioned way. And I know that it comes from, if you do the research through the history, all through the, military things and how it worked for one, and then one person copied it, and then we live in a society where everyone just follows suit, and no one is brave enough to run those experiments, like you said, even when the evidence is blaringly obvious in front of them. And Deb, you talked about the engagement, and there was something you said in the midst of all that brilliant stuff you said about how you're shifting from profit to balancing profit with people and balancing profit with purpose. And I love that, but I'll push the needle much further over there and just go, it's all about the people. It's all about the purpose. The profit will take care of itself if you focus on the people and making sure that the people are your purpose. So all of those ducks in a row takes care of the profit. Sorry, what was your question, Gary?
Rhys, it's perfect. No, but we were speaking before we hit record about the whole sustainability lens, and I think that'd be
yeah.
And I think that's really important, because sustainability is important. We've got this blue orb, and we don't know how much of it really is or not warming, and how much of it is or isn't. We don't have. We've got some amount of data, but I think at the end of the day, there's an intuitive sense that, as you're all speaking about, if we actually come at this from a heart base, and this is what I'd like to maybe get towards as well, is when we have this conversation, I think part of the issue, you can have all the evidence in the world, but if you're processing that at just a head level, you can go yes, no, yes, no. If you give that data to your heart, I think you're going to get some pretty different behavior changes. I'm just wondering, that's in my experience to date anyway, is that when you run evidence through the heart, you tend to get a slightly different reaction than you do just going through the head. And I'd love for any of you to sort of jump in and challenge and build and sort of pull that apart. I wonder what comes up for you with that.
Yeah, well, I think definitely that there's been so much research. You look at places like Heart Math, and they're doing so much stuff about how the heart generates not only energy, not only a sort of magnetic field that helps, when you have this connection that helps exchange those ideas, that energy shift. It actually sending lots of, it's like a second brain, really. I mean, some people say there's a third brain in your gut as well, but I think the typical model of the head brain, the main brain, is that you have the left side and the right side. So as far as I know, the heart doesn't have that conflict. It's pretty much just the right side, it's just all the good stuff. Whereas in your main brain, you started off with just the good stuff, and then as time's gone on, we've evolved and we progress, and the left side, the logical side, the evaluating side, the quantitative and qualitative side that makes sense. Okay, so let's throw this in. So there's like the masculine side and there's the feminine side. And I don't mean just like in male and female sort of thing, but in sort of ancient societies and things, there was much more of a predominance of the feminine side, and there was much more of a balance with the nature as well as with the spiritual. So since, I don't know when exactly, but there's definitely been a push towards the masculine side, and because of that, there are various repercussions, of various let's say negative consequences. Whereas now we're in that sort of shift where we're changing to sort of like the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, and so people are saying that we're moving more into this kind of more of a balance, more of a feminine side again, and that's why people are more starting to talk about the heart. That's why people are engaging with that new sort of style of leadership, like Mark Crowley, who was on our show recently. One of the forefront people with that. His book is great. I know that Mike is a good friend of his, and you guys are often speaking from the same page. But when you can really engage with that rather than engaging with your head first, that's when you start to feel some significant changes. That's when you really start to believe and live that people first, humans first ideology. It's not about seeing results. It's not about looking at the data and seeing the ROI. It's just about doing the right thing and knowing that the ROI is on the individual basis. It's not about the bottom line. So that ties back to that idea of not putting profit first, putting people first.
That's so cool, Mike. I love to know what you're thinking. All that comes back for me is actually Tom van der Lubbe again, when he joined us on episode 102, when he said their whole business runs on the golden rule. That's it. They've got no values, no vision. Like, it's literally treat others how you want to be treated. Like, that's their whole business model.
And I love that, because there can be, again, so much complexity that we engage in, and we think that we have to figure things out at a grander level and put more knowledge, and let's explain it, and let's bring all the science in. And reality is, when people want to do things, they do them well. Mm-hmm. And so there's this whole thing about desire, and desire doesn't come out of your head. Desire comes out of your heart. Desire comes out of your soul. And there's this whole we talk about what process we're in, and I think we're in a process of maturity. And maturity says, I know myself, mind, body, spirit, right? And there is then the journey that we go off on, and so there's this self-enlightenment that I think it empowers a sustainable workforce, because people show up because they want to. They desire to be there. They will then perform better than we could command them to perform. And so I actually think a lot of it's simple. Strip away all of the complexity that we've been, ingenious about putting in place through the Industrial Revolution, right? Through the last 100 years, we've invented things, and we put systems in place, and we know these processes, and we've got that down. We can do all that really, really well. It's documented. But when we can train people to step into, what's really sparking and driving them, and allow them to go run the race in the stride that they already came to the racetrack with, more people will cross that finish line, healthy and happy, than, if we try to change the pace and the stride, and what shoes they're wearing, and who they follow, and what lane they run in, and like we just put them on the track and tell them to run a lap. It's kind of that simple.
You've seen me run before, haven't you, Mike? Very similar. Well, as we start to wind our conversation up, what's coming up for you, Debs, as what's some of your passing thoughts as we've gone through this exploration during this conversation?
No, it was just fascinating. Of course, yeah, it's just like, oh my gosh, we've got to finish already. I remember a few years ago, somebody told me, okay, I don't know anything about neuroscience. Okay, I don't claim that at all. But I remember this, and it popped into my head when I was listening to Rhys. That decisions are made on an emotional level, however, they're justified on a cognitive level. So if we just remember that, so hang on a minute. So emotional level equals heart space. And the cognitive level is the data, the analysis space. So we can't function. I'm just wondering if we can function one without the other. If we just did things because we just emotionally felt like it without thinking about the consequences, it could probably sometimes pay a high price. On the other hand, if we do things like we've said earlier, having all the evidence on the table, nobody does anything about it because the desire's not there, because the heart's not there. So I think it's like bringing the two together and saying, okay, so, we're not going to diss data, and we're not going to diss the people who love being in that headspace. But what we need to do, or it's an invitation, or perhaps, I don't know if it's enough, but I'm just kind of brainstorming, which is, okay, but what about the people in the heart space? And going back to your earlier question, Gary, to Rhys, which was what's stopping people from, opening up that space? So the heart space is also the vulnerable space. And if we're not in the right in an environment that encourages us to be vulnerable, we first need to be courageous. We need to be extremely courageous. And if you're on your own, you ain't going to do it unless you just want to commit, career suicide or whatever. And then, so to be vulnerable, but when you're in that space, it's a beautiful space, but that is not, how is that seen? Why is there not that space? So you've got the cognitive space over here. Okay, great, brilliant. You've got more data, you've got more tables, more Excel spreadsheets, brilliant. Okay, what about all those who are brilliant in the creative space, in the vulnerable space where ideation happens, where innovative practices happen, where new agile systems are conceived and then put into practice? And when I was going through my burnout and understanding all what happened, in an old-fashioned sort of poisoned culture, people who have integrity and who walk their talk every day, people who are creative, people who are authentic, because you can see straight away, you just know, you feel it, right? People who, when they're speaking to you authentically, and all this kind of profile is very often ostracized from the power hungry, because those who function from the heart space, they could be seen as a threat because, oh, wait a minute, gosh, that's like totally unknown territory. Where is she or he going to take us? Okay, can you just keep quiet, please? Can we just stick on the cognitive level, please? It's so much safer. And so anyway, I just threw that out there.
Oh, it's beautiful. I mean, I love the way that all of that, Deb's, just tied back to, your values of growth and connection. And I think that you really just spoke to that so clearly, and I love that. And you know, the danger of, you know, elevating people that are operating with that maturity of head heart connection. It has to be connected, obviously. They, you know, they need to be together. But the fear for current authority that is in fear of losing their power, they already know that those that live with the heart space, those that lead with heart, are the ones that people are already following. Like you talked about the authentic person. And so if you go into a room and, you know, you could look at the person that is the authority and you could probably pick them out, right? But then you also see the one that people are kind of moving to. And sometimes it's the same person. And I think that's the great opportunity is let's start promoting the ones that people are already following, and then we'll have great leadership. And that's a diverse group. Those are men and women, and they're men and women of every color and race and religion. It doesn't have the cognitive boundaries that we've built the containers around. And that I, you know, one of my missions is to knock down those containers, to allow better things to happen.
Every time Mike says that, I've got this image of like us like picking him up by his feet and just using his head as the ram as we open up more doors. So last word to you, Rhys, before we get your contact details of you. What's come up for you?
So what Mike mentioned earlier about people trying to sink the boat, and it made me imagine like the different people on the boat, different types of boat here. But you know, there's people who are trying to sink it. You've got the commander somewhere on the top barking orders. You've got the people who are milling about. Maybe they're sunbathing. Maybe they're doing nothing. Then you've got like a small percentage of people who are on the oars, drastically trying to do it, and everyone's going, do this more, do this faster, do this. And you're like, oh, we can't, and not everyone's helping. We need to engage other people. I'm like, no, just get the results in. Don't do all the simple basic stuff. Like actually ask people why and what they would do to make these improvements. And then surprise, surprise, all those small minority of people who are working so hard to do everything for everybody else, they have a burnout, you know, obviously. And so what I wanted to finish with is just this idea that I'm experimenting with now. It's conscious leadership. So it's obviously heart-based, it's obviously mind-based, and it's obviously spiritually based. But for me, the things that I agree with you, Mike, that we try to overcomplicate everything. The truth is that the old system worked because it was so simple, and it was when we tried to provide so many complex solutions to the problem, we get distracted and realize that there's just the simple things like, you know, asking people, communicating with them, connecting with people, showing that you care, employing that curiosity thing, that co-creation, and also the community. So these are all the things that for me is what exemplifies conscious leadership. And I think it does what you say, Dave. It employs all three of those sort of aspects. It's not disregarding anyone. It's not any one of them. It's not promoting or delegating, no, demoting any one of them to a less important piece. And it's only when we have that collective that we can actually get forward. So I view the leader as being like the cog in the wheel, and everyone has their different aspects. And only when all the cogs are working in the same direction, the same purpose, the same engagement, does the wheel go forward. And, you know, the better that is, the faster the wheel goes forward.
And I want to say one thing to both of you, and why I appreciate your work so much is, you know, what we're talking about here are the things that haven't really been taught. And in the work that you're doing, you know, facilitating change, right? In human-centered, in a human-centered way, Debs, you know, being that advocate for connection and creating and the beliefs that come with that. And Rhys, with, you know, with your work with the true self leadership and, you know, the conscious leadership and even the spiritual intelligence that you mentioned early on. And, you know, those are the things that haven't been commonly taught. And so you're bringing the opportunity for people to step in to that new thinking, that new awareness, and learn. And I think that's very empowering. And I commend you for staying on that path, because it's not the, you know, it's not the large paved road right now. You're laying down those pavers so others, so more people can walk that path. So I commend you for that.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, like our friend Kevin would say, it's about choosing the path less traveled and then, being a guiding light to see what else can be there, rather than trying to just retract the same old thinking that has led us to this problem and it's not going to lead us to the solution.
It's trailblazing, right?
That's
yes.
it.
Yes.
Yeah,
and it's practice. It's pursuit of best possibilities rather than the regimen of best practices.
Nice.
Thank you.
Very cool. Thank you, everyone. This is one of those things where you're like, no, we can do this for another 3 hours. Easy. So we will come back to this, I'm pretty sure. And I just want to just add an invitation from my side that as you've heard us have this conversation today, we are in challenging times, but it's also, you're probably not going to have this amount of space to be able to recreate or reimagine what you might want to show up as in 4, 6, 8, 12 weeks time. So why not have a little think where you've heard from Debs and from Rhys and from Mike today, and just think, are there 1 or 2 things that I could actually adopt as myself to try and make a shift? And also, could I maybe share some of this insight that I've heard today within my work organisation, if that's somewhere that you work? There's some gold dust that these people have shared with you today. And I cannot recommend enough that you try and use some of this while you've got the space to still see and sense before it all gets crazy again. So thank you. So Debs, how can people find you? What's the best way to get in contact with you? And bearing in mind that one of your values is connection.
LinkedIn.
Simples.
Yeah, same for me. LinkedIn is the easiest one. And yeah, also invite people to check out our podcast. TNT ESQ podcast. We exemplify all those things that you're talking about, Gary, about not thinking better, not doing better, but now actually being better. So it's an evolution, just like with every one of us. Everything is moving in the right direction, I hope. And yes, we have permission now to try things, to fail, and to try again. So why not? Be the best person you can be.
You lot are awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, and speak to you again. Take care, all.
Thank you.